The sharp snip of scissors and lingering scent of hair products filled the air as Cassidy Kane methodically worked through her client's hair, unaware that the ordinary Tuesday at Bliss and Beauty Salon was about to change her life forever. 27-year-old Cassidy, with her hazel eyes focused on the task at hand, barely noticed when the salon's door chimed, announcing a new arrival. "Quincy!" Elizabeth Lawrence exclaimed, rising from the waiting area to embrace her brother. "I didn't expect you to pick me up." "You could have just sent the car." Cassidy glanced up briefly from her station. Elizabeth was one of her regular clients, a sweet, fashionable woman with impeccable taste who came in every 3 weeks for highlights and a trim. Today had been a full treatment day, highlights cut, and a blowout that had taken the better part of 2 hours. "I was in the neighborhood," Quincy Lawrence replied, his deep voice carrying across the salon. "Besides, I need to talk to you about Mom's birthday plans." Cassidy returned her attention to her client, a middle-aged woman named Patricia who was telling a lengthy story about her daughter's college applications. She tried not to eavesdrop on Elizabeth's conversation, but couldn't help noticing the tall figure waiting patiently by the reception desk. Quincy Lawrence cut an impressive figure in his tailored navy suit. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, his jawline sharp, and when he smiled at something his sister said, Cassidy found herself momentarily distracted by the warmth it brought to his face. "All done, Patricia," Cassidy said, swiveling the chair to face the mirror. "What do you think?" While Patricia admired her new look, Elizabeth approached Cassidy's station. "Cass, have you met my brother? Quincy, this is Cassidy, the only person I trust with my hair." Cassidy smiled politely, extending her hand. "Nice to meet you." When Quincy's larger hand enveloped hers, she felt a spark of something she couldn't quite identify. "The pleasure's mine," he said, his blue eyes meeting hers with intensity that made her breath catch. "My sister talks about you constantly. According to her, you're some kind of hair wizard." "Oh, she exaggerates," Cassidy laughed, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. "I just do my job." "Don't be modest," Elizabeth interjected. "You saved me from that awful asymmetrical disaster last year. That alone earned you saint status." Quincy checked his watch, a sleek, expensive timepiece that Cassidy couldn't help noticing. "We should go if we want to make that reservation, Liz." "Right," Elizabeth nodded, turning back to Cassidy. "Same time in 3 weeks. I've got you down in the system," Cassidy confirmed, already moving to clean her station. "Enjoy your evening." As they left, Cassidy found herself watching Quincy's retreating back. There was something magnetic about him, but she quickly shook away the thought. Men like him, polished, clearly wealthy, confident, didn't date women like her. Women who rented tiny apartments and worked 10-hour shifts cutting hair. What Cassidy didn't know as she swept up hair from her station floor was that Quincy Lawrence was more than just Elizabeth's well-dressed brother. He was Quincy Lawrence of Lawrence Innovations, a self-made billionaire whose technology company had revolutionized renewable energy storage. And for some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about the hairdresser with clever hands and a genuine smile who had just met his gaze for only a few fleeting moments. "Who's the new girl?" Quincy asked Elizabeth as they settled into his Tesla. Elizabeth looked confused. "Who?" "Cassidy. She's not new. She's been doing my hair for almost 2 years. You've never mentioned her before. I talk about her all the time. Cassidy with the magic hands, the one who fixed my hair emergency before your company gala last December." Elizabeth studied her brother's face. "Oh my God, you think she's cute?" "I didn't say that," Quincy replied, pulling into traffic with perhaps more concentration than necessary. "You didn't have to. I haven't seen you look at someone like that since. Actually, I don't think I've ever seen you look at anyone like that." Elizabeth grinned mischievously. "She's single, you know. I didn't ask. But you wanted to. Quincy remained silent, which only made Elizabeth's grin widen. She's incredible, Elizabeth continued. Worked her way through cosmetology school, has the most loyal client base at the salon. She volunteers giving haircuts at the homeless shelter once a month. Oh, and she makes these amazing playlists for the salon, Liz. Quincy cut her off. I just met her for 2 minutes. And you're already smitten. Quincy scoffed, but didn't deny it. There had been something about Cassidy Kane that had caught his attention immediately, a quiet confidence, intelligence in her eyes, the gentle way she'd spoken to her elderly client. It was refreshing after the calculated social climbers who typically pursued him. She has no idea who you are, by the way, Elizabeth added. I never use your last name at the salon. Too many questions. Too many people suddenly interested in being my friend. Quincy nodded. Being a billionaire at 34 came with certain complications, never knowing if people were interested in him, or his bank account being the primary one. The idea that Cassidy had met him without that knowledge was appealing. Back at the salon, Cassidy was finishing her last client when her coworker Valerie sidled up beside her. Was that Elizabeth Lawrence's brother? Valerie asked, her voice low and excited. Yeah, why? You have no idea who that was, do you? Valerie looked incredulous. Cassidy shrugged. Some finance bro. He was wearing a suit nicer than my entire wardrobe. Valerie grabbed her phone, quickly pulling up a web page before thrusting it into Cassidy's hands. That was Quincy Lawrence, as in Lawrence Innovations, as in billionaire tech genius who's revolutionizing the energy sector. Cassidy stared at the screen, which showed a professional headshot of the same man who'd stood in their salon less than an hour ago. The article headline read, Quincy Lawrence named among Forbes' 30 most influential under 40. No way, Cassidy breathed, scanning the article. Elizabeth never mentioned what her brother does. Would you? If your brother was worth billions, Valerie took her phone back. He's famously private, rarely does interviews. Rumor has it he turned down a 9-figure acquisition offer from Renew Tech last year because he wanted to keep control of his company's direction. Cassidy tried to reconcile the man from the article, the serious-faced tech mogul described as brilliant and ruthlessly innovative, with the man who'd smiled warmly at his sister in their salon. His handshake had been firm but gentle, his eyes kind. Well, Cassidy said, returning to cleaning her station, it doesn't matter, not like I'm going to see him again anyway. Valerie smirked. You never know, Elizabeth comes in every 3 weeks like clockwork. And in the 2 years she's been coming here, he's never once picked her up. Today was clearly an exception. But even as Cassidy dismissed the encounter, she couldn't stop thinking about those few moments of connection, how for just a second, when his blue eyes had met hers, the busy salon had seemed to fade away. Quincy Lawrence was not in the habit of being distracted. His success had been built on laser focus, determination, and the ability to block out anything irrelevant to his goals. Yet 3 days after meeting Cassidy Kane, he found himself staring out his office window instead of reviewing the quarterly reports his CFO had sent over. Quincy. Did you hear what I just said? His assistant, Marcus, was looking at him expectantly. Sorry, what? Marcus raised an eyebrow. I said the team from SolarStream is here for the partnership meeting. They're waiting in the conference room. Right, thanks. Quincy gathered his tablet and notes, mentally shifting back into CEO mode. The meeting went well, but throughout the 2-hour discussion of integrating their technologies, Quincy found his mind occasionally wandering to hazel eyes and graceful hands. What's with you lately? Asked Rachel Chen, his COO and oldest friend, as they walked back to his office afterward. You seem distracted. I'm fine, Quincy dismissed. Just thinking about the production timeline. Rachel clearly didn't believe him but let it slide. We're still on for dinner with the investors tomorrow night, right? Capitol Grill at 7. Yes, I'll be there. After Rachel left, Quincy found himself opening his browser and typing Bliss and Beauty Salon into the search bar. Before he could talk himself out of it, he was dialing the number. Bliss and Beauty, how can I help you? A cheerful voice answered. I'd like to schedule a haircut, Quincy said, surprising himself with his own actions. Certainly. When would you like to come in? Tomorrow afternoon. With Cassidy Kane if she's available. There was a pause. Let me check her schedule. She has a 3:30 opening tomorrow. May I have your name? Quincy Lawrence. Another pause, longer this time. Oh, yes, Mr. Lawrence. We have you down for tomorrow at 3:30 with Cassidy. We'll see you then. Quincy hung up, immediately questioning his decision. He didn't actually need a haircut. He just had one last week at the high-end barbershop he'd been using for years. What was he doing? The rational part of his brain told him this was ridiculous. He was a 34-year-old CEO, not some lovesick teenager. He'd met Cassidy Kane exactly once for less than 5 minutes. Yet something about her had stuck with him, and for once in his meticulously planned life, Quincy decided to follow an impulse. The next day, Cassidy was wiping down her station when Valerie appeared at her side, eyes wide. You will not believe who your 3:30 appointment is, she said in an urgent whisper. Who? Quincy Lawrence. Cassidy froze. Elizabeth's brother, the billionaire. Yes, Valerie hissed. He specifically requested you. A strange flutter of nervousness settled in Cassidy's stomach. But I've never cut men's hair professionally, except for basic trims. I specialize in women's styles and color. Well, you better brush up quickly, because he'll be here in 20 minutes. Cassidy spent those 20 minutes in a mild panic, reviewing men's cutting techniques in her head and wondering what had prompted this visit. When the reception desk called to tell her that her 3:30 had arrived, she took a deep breath and walked to the waiting area. Quincy stood as she approached, looking even more imposing than she remembered in a charcoal gray suit with a light blue shirt that matched his eyes perfectly. His dark hair was neatly styled and definitely didn't need a cut. Hi, she said, extending her hand professionally. Good to see you again. Come on back. As she led him to her station, Cassidy was acutely aware of the salon's eyes on them. Even the other stylists were watching curiously. So, she said once he was seated in her chair, meeting his eyes in the mirror, what are we doing today? Quincy seemed momentarily at a loss. Just a trim, he finally said. Cassidy raised an eyebrow. Your hair looks like it was cut very recently. A hint of color touched his cheeks. Is it that obvious? I'm a professional, she said with a small smile. I can tell when someone doesn't actually need my services. Their eyes met in the mirror, and Quincy's usual confidence faltered. I wanted to see you again, he admitted. This seemed like the most straightforward approach. The directness of his response caught Cassidy off guard. Most men she knew would have maintained the pretense or made up an excuse. I see, she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the warmth spreading through her chest. Well, since you're here, I might as well give you a trim. On the house, since you clearly don't need it. I insist on paying. Cassidy draped the cape around him. Fine, but I'm giving you the friends and family discount. As she worked, they fell into surprisingly easy conversation. Quincy asked about her background, genuinely interested as she told him about growing up in a small town in Oregon, moving to the city 7 years ago and working her way up at the Salon. What about you? She asked, carefully trimming around his ears. Did you always know you wanted to go into? Whatever it is you do. She wasn't ready to reveal that she knew exactly who he was, A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "You don't know what I do you? Should I?" "No," he said, looking pleased. "It's refreshing, actually." He told her about founding his company right out of college, developing energy storage technology that was now being implemented across the country. He spoke with passion but without arrogance, and Cassidy found herself increasingly drawn to his obvious intelligence and vision. "Done," she announced eventually, removing the cape. "Not that much needed doing." Quincy stood, running a hand through his hair. "It feels great, thank you." At the reception desk, he insisted on paying full price plus a generous tip. Before leaving, he hesitated. "Cassidy, would you have dinner with me tomorrow night?" The direct question took her by surprise again. "Just dinner," he added quickly. "I've enjoyed talking with you." Cassidy considered him for a moment. There were a dozen reasons to say no. He was Elizabeth's brother. He was clearly from a different world than hers. Dating clients was generally a bad idea. But there was something genuine in his expression that made all those reasons seem unimportant. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'd like that." His smile was immediate and warm. "Great. I'll pick you up at 7, if you're comfortable giving me your address." They exchanged phone numbers instead, and Cassidy promised to text him her address later. As she watched him leave, Valerie appeared beside her. "Did Quincy Lawrence just ask you out?" she demanded. "I think he did," Cassidy replied, still processing it herself. And I said yes," Valerie squealed, drawing attention from nearby clients. "Oh my God, you're dating a billionaire." "I'm having dinner with him," Cassidy corrected. "One dinner. And keep your voice down." But even as she tried to downplay it, Cassidy couldn't deny the excitement bubbling up inside her. There had been something in the way Quincy looked at her, like he was genuinely seeing her, not just looking. That night, Cassidy agonized over what to wear to dinner with a billionaire. Her modest wardrobe suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. After trying on and discarding nearly every outfit she owned, she finally settled on a simple navy blue dress that hugged her curves without being too revealing. It was the most expensive item she owned, purchased for a friend's wedding last year. The next evening, promptly at 7, her phone buzzed with a text from Quincy announcing his arrival. Cassidy took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and headed downstairs. She'd been expecting a luxury car with a driver, but instead found Quincy leaning against a sleek Tesla, waiting for her himself. He straightened when he saw her, his eyes warming appreciatively. "You look beautiful," he said. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "You clean up pretty well yourself." It was an understatement in dark jeans and a light gray button-down with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. He opened the passenger door for her, and Cassidy slid into the buttery leather seat, trying not to show how impressed she was by the car's elegant interior. "I hope you like Italian," Quincy said as he started driving. "There's a place downtown I think you'll enjoy. Small, family-owned." Cassidy had been expecting some exclusive, high-end restaurant where she'd need to worry about using the wrong fork, and felt a wave of relief. Italian sounds perfect. The restaurant, Billionaire, was indeed small and charming, with flickering candles on each table and the rich sense of garlic and tomato sauce in the air. To Cassidy's surprise, Quincy was greeted like family. "Quincy," a portly man with a thick mustache embraced him. "It has been too long." "Marco," Quincy returned the embrace warmly. "This is Cassidy. Cassidy, this is Marco Ferretti. He makes the best tiramisu in the city." "Only the city," Marco pretended offense. "The world, my boy, the world." He turned to Cassidy with a broad smile. "Any friend of Quincy's is family here. Come, I have the perfect table." As they followed Marco to a cozy corner booth, Cassidy whispered, "You come here often." "When I can," Quincy replied. Marco's father gave me my first job when I was 16 washing dishes. I put my first paycheck toward computer parts. This unexpected glimpse into his past intrigued Cassidy. As they settled into their seats, she found herself genuinely wanting to know more about him, not Quincy Lawrence, the billionaire CEO, but Quincy the person. Over fresh bread and wine, they talked easily, like old friends catching up rather than near strangers on a first date. Cassidy learned that, despite his wealth, Quincy had grown up in modest circumstances, the son of a nurse and a high school teacher. His brilliance with technology had been evident from an early age, earning him scholarships that had funded his education. "What about your family?" he asked as their main courses arrived, homemade fettuccine for her, linguine with clams for him. "It's just me and my mom now," Cassidy said. "Dad left when I was 12. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. She's retired now, lives back in Oregon. You're close." "Very. I call her every Sunday without fail." Cassidy twirled pasta around her fork. "She wanted me to go to college, but we couldn't afford it. Beauty school was my compromise, something I loved that didn't require a 4-year degree. And you're happy with your choice." There was no judgment in his tone, only genuine curiosity. "I am," she said firmly. "I love what I do. Every client who leaves my chair feeling more confident, more like themselves, that's why I do it." Quincy nodded, something like admiration in his eyes. "That's how I feel about my work. It's not about the money, it's about creating something meaningful." For dessert, Marco insisted on bringing them his famous tiramisu, refusing to take no for an answer. As they shared the creamy confection, Cassidy realized she was having the best first date of her life. Quincy was attentive, intelligent, and surprisingly down to earth for someone of his stature. The revelation of his true wealth had come naturally during their conversation about his company, when he'd mentioned recent expansions that made it clear Lawrence Innovations was no small startup. Cassidy had nodded, letting him know she was aware of his status. "Elizabeth never mentioned what you did," she explained. "But after you visited the salon, Valerie filled me in." "Does it change things?" he asked, his expression guarded. Cassidy considered the question carefully. "It makes me curious about why you'd be interested in someone like me," she admitted honestly. "Our worlds are pretty different." "Maybe that's part of what I find appealing," Quincy said. "You see me as a person, not a balance sheet. Do you know how rare that is?" After dinner, Quincy suggested a walk along the nearby riverfront park. The spring evening was mild, the sky clear and scattered with stars. As they strolled side by side, their hands occasionally brushing, Cassidy found herself wishing the night wouldn't end. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they paused to watch a boat gliding along the river, its lights reflecting in the dark water. "Anything." "Why me? You could date literally anyone, models, celebrities, whoever. Why ask out your sister's hairdresser?" Quincy was quiet for a moment, considering. "When I met you at the salon, you looked at me differently than most people do. There was no calculation, no agenda, just genuine interest." He turned to face her. "And then I couldn't stop thinking about your smile." The sincerity in his voice made Cassidy's heart skip. Before she could respond, Quincy reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'd like to see you again," he said softly. "I'd like that too." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Quincy leaned in slightly, his intention clear. Cassidy closed the distance, and when their lips met, she felt a spark of connection that startled her with its intensity. The kiss was brief but perfect, a gentle promise of more to come. When they pulled apart, Quincy's smile made her heart flutter. On the drive back to her apartment, they made plans to see each other again 2 days later. At her door, he kissed her once more, lingering a little longer this time. "Good night, Cassidy," he said, his voice low. "Good night, Quincy." As she watched him walk away, Cassidy leaned against her door, feeling like she just stepped into someone else's life. But the warmth in her chest and the lingering taste of his kiss on her lips were undeniably real. Over the next few weeks, Cassidy and Quincy fell into a rhythm of seeing each other whenever their busy schedules allowed. Quincy surprised her with his thoughtfulness, remembering details she mentioned in passing, sending flowers to the salon after she'd had a particularly difficult day with a demanding client, bringing her favorite coffee when picking her up. For their third date, instead of another fancy restaurant, Quincy suggested a food truck festival in the park. Cassidy had mentioned loving street food, and true to his word, he'd found the perfect opportunity to indulge her preference. They spent hours sampling tacos, dumplings, and artisanal ice cream, Quincy seeming completely comfortable among the crowds despite occasional double takes from people who recognized him. "Doesn't it bother you?" Cassidy asked when a group of college students not so subtly took photos of him. "Being recognized everywhere," Quincy shrugged. "It used to. Now I just accept it as part of the territory. The company's success means visibility." Their fifth date was at Quincy's penthouse apartment, a stunning space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But instead of the ostentatious display of wealth Cassidy had half expected, the apartment was surprisingly comfortable and lived in, with bookshelves crammed full, a well-used kitchen, and framed photos of family throughout. Quincy cooked for her a surprisingly delicious risotto that he admitted had taken him months to perfect. After dinner, they curled up on his couch with glasses of wine, talking late into the night. When Cassidy finally checked the time, it was past midnight. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "Early client tomorrow," Quincy hesitated. "You could stay," he suggested, his voice careful. "No expectations. I have a guest room if you'd prefer." The offer was tempting. "I don't have any of my things," she said, though it sounded like an excuse even to her own ears. "Fair enough," Quincy nodded, not pushing. Rain check. That night, after he'd driven her home and kissed her goodnight with increasing passion, Cassidy realized she was falling for him hard and fast. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. What she didn't know was that Quincy had already fallen, completely and without reservation, in a way he never had before. The following Saturday, Cassidy was in the middle of a complex balayage treatment when Elizabeth arrived for her appointment. Seeing her client into Valerie's capable hands for the processing time, Cassidy greeted Elizabeth with a somewhat nervous smile. "Hi, Elizabeth. Ready for your trim?" "Absolutely," Elizabeth replied, following Cassidy to her station. As Cassidy draped the cape around her, Elizabeth caught her eye in the mirror. "So, I hear you've been seeing quite a bit of my brother lately." Cassidy's hands faltered briefly. "He told you. He didn't have to." Quincy's been smiling for weeks, something he rarely does, unless he's just closed a major deal. "Then he mentioned your name 3 times during our last family dinner." Elizabeth's expression was knowing. "My brother is many things, but subtle isn't one of them." Unsure how Elizabeth felt about the development, Cassidy focused on sectioning Elizabeth's hair. "I hope it's not weird for you me dating your brother." "Are you kidding? I'm thrilled." Elizabeth's enthusiasm was genuine. "Quincy works too much and dates too little. And when he does date, it's usually these polished, ambitious women who are more interested in what he can do for their careers than in him as a person." "I'm definitely not interested in him for career advancement," Cassidy assured her. "Hair styling for tech companies isn't really a thing." Elizabeth laughed. "That's exactly why you're perfect for him. You like him for him." She paused, growing more serious. He seems really happy, Cassidy. I haven't seen him like this. Well, ever. The conversation shifted to Elizabeth's upcoming charity gala, but Cassidy found herself mulling over Elizabeth's words for the rest of the day. The idea that she might be having such a profound effect on Quincy was both flattering and intimidating. That evening, Quincy took her to the symphony, something Cassidy had mentioned always wanting to experience. Though classical music wasn't her usual preference, the power and beauty of the live orchestra moved her deeply. Quincy's hand found hers during a particularly stirring movement, their fingers intertwining naturally. Later, at a quiet bar for a nightcap, Cassidy mentioned her conversation with Elizabeth. "She knows about us," she said, watching his reaction carefully. "She seems supportive." Quincy smiled. "She's been pushing me to ask you out since the day we met. I think her exact words were, 'If you don't, you're an idiot.' Wise woman, your sister." "She is," Quincy agreed. He traced patterns on the back of Cassidy's hand, his expression growing more serious. "Cassidy, there's something I need to tell you." A flutter of anxiety rose in her chest. "That sounds ominous." "It's not, I promise. It's just—" He took a breath. "I'm falling in love with you. I know it's fast, and I don't expect you to feel the same way yet. But I wanted you to know where I stand." Cassidy stared at him, heart pounding. The directness that had first attracted her to him was on full display. No games, no manipulation, just honest emotion. "I'm falling for you too," she admitted softly. "And it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because you're you, Quincy Lawrence, billionaire tech genius, and I'm just me." "There's no just about you," he said firmly. "You're the most authentic, compassionate, talented person I've ever met. The fact that you see me as a man, not a bank account or a business connection, means everything to me." Later that night, Cassidy stayed at Quincy's apartment for the first time. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, a physical expression of the deepening emotional connection between them. Falling asleep in his arms, Cassidy felt a sense of rightness she'd never experienced before. Over the next month, their relationship grew stronger. They settled into a routine of spending weekends together, either at his penthouse or exploring the city. Quincy introduced her to his inner circle: Rachel, his coup, Marcus, his loyal assistant, and a few close friends from his college days who treated Cassidy with warm acceptance. For her part, Cassidy introduced Quincy to her best friend Tara, who approached the meeting with skepticism but ended up grudgingly admitting that Quincy seemed decent for a billionaire. Not everything was perfect, of course. They had their first real argument when Quincy, without consulting Cassidy, paid off her student loans from beauty school. He'd meant it as a loving gesture, but Cassidy felt it undermined her independence. "I've been handling my own finances since I was 18, she told him, hurt and angry. "I was making progress on those payments. I just wanted to help," Quincy said, genuinely confused by her reaction. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why wouldn't I use it to make your life easier?" "Because it's not about the money, Quincy. It's about agency. About feeling like you're equal in this relationship, not your charity case." The argument had ended with greater understanding on both sides, Quincy promising to consult her before making financial decisions that affected her. Cassidy acknowledging that his generosity came from love, not condescension. 6 weeks into their relationship, Cassidy received a call from her mother in Oregon. Her voice was shaky as she explained that their old family home needed major repairs, a new roof, foundation work that would cost far more than her modest retirement savings could cover. "I don't know what I'm going to do, honey," Barbara Kane sighed. "I might have to sell." The house had been in their family for 3 generations. The thought of her mother losing it broke Cassidy's heart, but her own savings weren't nearly enough to help. That night, as she and Quincy cooked dinner together in his kitchen, she told him about the situation, careful to make it clear she wasn't asking for money. "I'll figure something out," she said, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "Maybe a payment plan with the contractors." Quincy watched her thoughtfully. "What if I helped?" Cassidy set down her knife. "Quincy, hear me out," he said quickly. "Not as a gift, as an investment. I'll pay for the repairs, and if when we're no longer together you can pay me back, interest-free, over whatever time frame works for you." "You're planning for our breakup already?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "No," he said firmly. "But I understand your need for independence. This way you're not beholden to me if things don't work out. It's a safety net, not a cage." Cassidy considered his proposal. It was a reasonable compromise, one that showed he'd listened to her concerns during their previous argument. "Okay," she finally agreed, "but we're drawing up actual paperwork, and I'm paying you back regardless of what happens between us." Quincy nodded, respecting her terms. The next day, he had his lawyer draft a simple loan agreement, and the repairs on Barbara Kane's home began the following week. When Cassidy called to tell her mother about the arrangement, Barbara was silent for a long moment. "This man must really care about you," she said finally. "He does, Mom, and I care about him too." "Then I need to meet him," Barbara declared. "Properly, not just over FaceTime." Which was how, 2 weeks later, Cassidy found herself boarding Quincy's private jet for a weekend trip to Oregon. The fact that he owned a plane had been a revelation, one of many reminders of just how different their worlds were. "Nervous?" Quincy asked as they took off, noticing her white-knuckled grip on the armrest. "About flying?" "No, about you meeting my mother, absolutely." He laughed, taking her hand. "I've negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but I'm terrified too, if it helps." The admission eased her anxiety somewhat. "She's going to interrogate you mercilessly," Cassidy warned. "Single mom syndrome, very protective." "I'd expect nothing less." Barbara Kane lived up to Cassidy's warning. Over dinner at the newly repaired family home, she grilled Quincy on everything from his intentions with her daughter to his political views and family background. To his credit, Quincy answered every question with patience and honesty, never once showing irritation. After dinner, while Cassidy was washing dishes, Barbara joined Quincy on the porch swing. "You love her," Barbara said. "It wasn't a question." "More than I thought possible," Quincy admitted. "And the money, the lifestyle differences, that doesn't bother you?" "The only thing that bothers me is the thought that she might ever feel less than my equal because of it." Barbara studied him carefully. "My daughter has always been fiercely independent, too independent sometimes. Never letting anyone help her, even when she's drowning." "I've noticed," Quincy said wryly. "But she let you help with the house," Barbara pointed out. "That tells me everything I need to know about how she feels about you." By the end of the weekend, Barbara had given Quincy her stamp of approval, pulling him into a tight hug before they left. "Don't hurt her," she whispered in his ear, still managing to sound threatening despite her 5'2" frame. "I won't," he promised. "Not if I can help it." On the flight back, Cassidy curled against Quincy's side, feeling a new sense of contentment. "She likes you," she said. "I like her too," Quincy replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I can see where you get your strength." 3 months into their relationship, Lawrence Innovations held its annual charity gala, a major event on the city's social calendar. It would be Cassidy's first time attending an event as Quincy's official girlfriend, and she was a bundle of nerves. "I have nothing to wear to something like this," she fretted, pacing her apartment as Quincy watched from the couch. "And I don't know which fork to use or how to talk to billionaires about billionaire things." First of all, you talk to me about billionaire things just fine, Quincy pointed out. Second, just be yourself. That's who I'm in love with. Easy for you to say. You're not the hairdresser being thrown into a room full of tech moguls and socialites. Quincy stood, taking her hands to stop her pacing. If it helps, Elizabeth will be there and she's planning to stick to your side like glue. And as for the dress, don't you dare offer to buy me one, Cassidy warned. I can handle it. Quincy raised his hands in surrender. Wouldn't dream of it. I was just going to suggest that if you find something you love that's outside your budget, consider it an advance on your birthday present. Cassidy narrowed her eyes. My birthday is 7 months away. Christmas, then. It's May. Arbor Day, he offered with a hopeful smile. Despite her anxiety, Cassidy laughed. You're impossible. In the end, Cassidy did find a dress she loved, a floor-length emerald green gown that complemented her eyes and made her feel like a princess. It was still more than she'd ever spent on a piece of clothing, but she could afford it without Quincy's help, which mattered to her. The night of the gala, when Quincy saw her in the dress, his expression made every penny worth it. You look stunning, he said, his voice reverent. You clean up pretty well yourself, she replied, admiring him in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. The gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, the ballroom transformed into an elegant wonderland of lights and flowers. As Quincy's date, Cassidy found herself the subject of intense curiosity. Most people were polite, but she could feel the unspoken questions. Who is she? Where did she come from? What does Quincy Lawrence see in her? Elizabeth, true to her word, stayed close, introducing Cassidy to friendly faces and steering her away from the more judgmental socialites. Rachel Chen, Quincy's COO, also proved to be a valuable ally, treating Cassidy with warm respect that others noticed and emulated. Still, there were awkward moments. During dinner, Cassidy found herself seated next to the wife of a major investor who asked, with thinly veiled condescension, "And what exactly do you do, dear?" "I'm a hairstylist at Bliss and Beauty Salon," Cassidy answered, chin lifted slightly. "How?" "Interesting," the woman replied, clearly thinking the opposite. "And how did you and Quincy meet?" Before Cassidy could answer, Quincy, who had been listening while speaking to someone else, placed his hand over hers on the table. "Cassidy is Elizabeth's stylist. The moment I saw her, I was smitten. Had to make up an excuse for a haircut just to see her again." The simple gesture of support, the pride in his voice as he told their story, bolstered Cassidy's confidence. By the time they hit the dance floor later that evening, she was feeling more at ease. "You're handling all this beautifully," Quincy murmured as he guided her in a waltz. "I'm trying," she admitted. "It's just a lot. Everyone's watching us." "Let them watch," he said, pulling her closer. "They're just jealous that I have the most beautiful, genuine woman in the room." Later that night, back at his penthouse, as they lay tangled in his sheets, Cassidy voiced a concern that had been growing in her mind. "You ever worry that we're too different? That eventually the novelty of dating a regular person will wear off?" Quincy propped himself up on one elbow, looking at her seriously. "Is that what you think this is? Novelty?" "No," she said quickly. "But the world you live in, galas and investors and private jets, it's so far from mine." "Maybe that's because I've never felt like I fully belonged in that world either," Quincy admitted. "I built my company because I loved the technology, the potential to create change. The money was a byproduct." He traced her cheekbone gently. "With you, I feel more like myself than I ever have before. That's not novelty, Cassidy. That's finding home." The sincerity in his eyes chased away her doubts, at least for the moment. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied, sealing the words with a kiss that led to more. As their relationship approached the 6-month mark, Cassidy was surprised by how seamlessly their lives had intertwined. She still kept her apartment, but spent most nights at Quincy's penthouse. Her toothbrush had a permanent spot in his bathroom. Her favorite foods filled his pantry, and she'd even claimed a drawer in his massive closet for her things. For his part, Quincy had adjusted his notorious workaholic schedule to make time for their relationship. He still worked long hours, but made sure they had dinner together most nights, even if it meant he returned to work afterward while she read or watched TV nearby. One evening, as Quincy cooked and Cassidy set the table, she casually mentioned a client who had just returned from Paris. "I've always wanted to go to Paris," she sighed. "The architecture, the food, the art." Quincy looked up from the stove, an idea clearly forming. "Let's go." "What, to Paris?" Cassidy laughed. "Sure, let me just check my schedule and my non-existent vacation fund." "I'm serious," Quincy said. "I have a meeting in London next month. We could extend the trip, spend a week in Paris afterward." The spontaneity of the suggestion was tempting, but Cassidy hesitated. "I can't just take a week off on short notice. The Salon has bookings months in advance." "What if you could?" Quincy pressed. "Would you want to come?" The thought of seeing Paris with Quincy, exploring the Louvre hand in hand, sharing croissants at a sidewalk cafe, walking along the Seine at sunset was incredibly appealing. "Of course I would," she admitted, "but it's not practical." Quincy approached her, taking her hands in his. "One thing I've learned in business is that most problems have solutions if you're willing to look for them. Talk to your manager. See if there's a way to reschedule your clients. If there's a financial penalty for the Salon, I'll cover it." "I don't know. Just think about it," he asked. "Please?" The hope in his eyes was impossible to resist. "I'll ask tomorrow," she promised. To Cassidy's surprise, her manager at the Salon was enthusiastically supportive of the idea. "Are you kidding? Take the time off," Deanne exclaimed. "Quincy Lawrence wants to take you to Paris, you go to Paris." "But what about my clients? Some of them book months in advance." "We'll reschedule them. Most will understand once they hear it's for a once-in-a-lifetime trip." Deanne gave her a knowing look. "Besides, having our salon associated with Quincy Lawrence's girlfriend isn't exactly bad for business. We've had 5 new clients in the past month who specifically mentioned seeing you at that charity gala." Cassidy hadn't considered that her relationship might actually benefit the salon. It made her feel less guilty about the disruption to her schedule. That evening, she told Quincy she'd take the trip. His face lit up with a joy that made her heart skip. "You won't regret it," he promised, picking her up and spinning her around their kitchen. "I'm going to show you the Paris of your dreams." The trip was even more magical than Cassidy had imagined. After 3 days in London, where Quincy's meetings took only a portion of each day, leaving them time to explore together, they took the Eurostar to Paris. Quincy had booked a suite at a historic hotel near the Tuileries Garden, with a balcony that offered a view of the Eiffel Tower in the distance. When Cassidy stepped into the opulent room, she gasped. "This is too much," she breathed, taking in the chandelier, the plush furnishings, the bottle of champagne chilling beside a bouquet of roses. "Nothing is too much for you," Quincy said, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they looked out at the Paris skyline. "Besides, if we're only here for a week, I want it to be perfect." And it was perfect. They visited all the tourist must-sees: the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, the Louvre, but also wandered through lesser-known neighborhoods, discovering tiny bistros and hidden gardens. Quincy, who spoke passable French, handled all the interactions with locals, but encouraged Cassidy to practice the few phrases she'd learned from a language app. On their last night in Paris, after a dinner at a small restaurant in Montmartre, Quincy suggested a walk to a nearby viewpoint overlooking the city. The night was clear. The city spread out before them in a tapestry of lights. "I have something for you," Quincy said, reaching into his pocket. Cassidy's heart raced, wondering if this was the moment a proposal in Paris would certainly be romantic. But instead of a ring box, Quincy pulled out a delicate gold necklace with a small Eiffel Tower pendant. "To remember our first trip together," he said, fastening it around her neck. "The first of many, I hope." Though a small part of her felt a twinge of disappointment that it wasn't a proposal, Cassidy was touched by the thoughtful gift. "It's beautiful, thank you." Quincy's hand lingered on the nape of her neck. "There's something else I wanted to talk to you about." "Oh. Your lease is up next month, right?" Cassidy nodded. Her apartment had been more of a storage unit lately, given how much time she spent at Quincy's place. "I was thinking, why don't you move in with me, officially?" The question wasn't entirely unexpected, but it still gave Cassidy pause. Moving in together was a big step, one that would further intertwine their lives. "Are you sure that's what you want?" she asked. "I come with a lot of hair products and shoes." Quincy laughed. "I have more closet space than I know what to do with. And I want to wake up with you every morning, not just when it's convenient." Looking into his eyes, illuminated by the lights of Paris, Cassidy knew her answer. "Yes, I'd love to move in with you." The kiss they shared, with the city of lights spread out below them, felt like a promise of their future together. Upon returning from Paris, their lives shifted into a new gear. Cassidy gave notice on her apartment and began the process of sorting through her belongings, deciding what to keep and what to donate. Quincy cleared out half his closet and an entire bathroom for her use, making it clear that this wasn't just him letting her stay at his place, this was creating their home together. The move itself was relatively simple, given that Cassidy didn't own much furniture. Most of her possessions fit into a few dozen boxes, which Quincy insisted on helping carry despite having the resources to hire movers. His willingness to get his hands dirty, to sweat alongside her as they carried her life into his penthouse, only deepened her love for him. Their first night officially living together, they ordered takeout and sat among partially unpacked boxes, drinking champagne out of coffee mugs because they couldn't find the proper glasses. "To new beginnings," Quincy toasted. "To us," Cassidy replied, clinking her mug against his. As she settled into their shared life, Cassidy was pleasantly surprised by how easily they adapted to each other's habits and routines. Quincy was meticulous about some things. His home office was organized with almost military precision, but laid back about others, never commenting on Cassidy's tendency to leave half-empty teacups around the apartment or her ever-expanding collection of hair styling tools. For her part, Cassidy learned to work around Quincy's sometimes unpredictable schedule, understanding when he needed to take late-night calls with international partners or disappeared into his office for hours during a company crisis. 3 months after moving in together, during a rare weekend when neither of them had obligations, Quincy suggested a hike at a nearby state park. It was a perfect autumn day, crisp air, blue skies, and the forest ablaze with fall colors. As they reached a scenic overlook after a 2-hour climb, Cassidy paused to catch her breath and admire the view. The valley below was a patchwork of reds, oranges, and golds, with a river winding through like a silver ribbon. "Worth the climb, right?" Quincy said, handing her a water bottle from his backpack. "Absolutely," she agreed, taking a long drink. When she lowered the bottle, she found Quincy on one knee in front of her, a small velvet box in his hand. "Quincy," she breathed, her heart suddenly racing faster than it had during their entire hike. "Cassidy," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "This past year has been the happiest of my life." Before I met you, I thought I knew what success meant: building a company, changing an industry. But now I know that true success is finding someone who makes you want to be better, who sees the real you and loves you anyway." He opened the box, revealing a ring that took Cassidy's breath away, a round diamond set in a simple platinum band, elegant without being ostentatious. "I love everything about you," Quincy continued. "Your compassion, your independence, your unwavering support. I love how you put me in my place when I need it, and how you always smell like whatever shampoo you've been experimenting with that week. I love that you've shown me a life beyond spreadsheets and board meetings." Tears welled in Cassidy's eyes as he took her hand. "Cassidy Kane, will you make me the happiest man on earth and marry me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, her voice catching. "Yes, of course I will." Quincy slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and stood to pull her into his arms. Their kiss was salt-tinged from her tears, but filled with joy and promise. "I can't believe this is happening," Cassidy said when they finally broke apart. "I'm engaged to a billionaire. It sounds like the plot of a movie." Quincy laughed. "I prefer you're engaged to a man who loves you more than anything in the world, but whatever works for you." As they hiked back down the mountain, hand in hand, Cassidy kept glancing at her ring, watching how it caught the sunlight filtering through the trees. "I should warn you," Quincy said as they neared the trailhead. "I may have told a few people I was planning to propose today." "A few people?" "Elizabeth, your mom, Rachel, and possibly my parents." Cassidy stopped short. "You told my mother." "I asked her permission, actually," Quincy admitted. "Old-fashioned, I know, but it felt right." The thought of Quincy, with all his wealth and power, respectfully asking Barbara Kane for her daughter's hand touched Cassidy deeply. "What did she say?" after she finished crying. "She said it was about time and made me promise to have the wedding in Oregon so her friends could attend." Cassidy laughed, imagining the conversation. "That sounds like Mom." When they reached the car, Cassidy checked her phone to find it exploding with messages from her mother, from Elizabeth, from Valerie and other friends at the salon who had somehow already heard the news. "We should celebrate properly," Quincy said as they drove back to the city. "Dinner somewhere special, your choice," but Cassidy had a different idea. "Actually, I'd rather just go home. Order in, open a bottle of wine, and start figuring out what this new chapter looks like." Quincy smiled, taking her hand across the console. "Home it is." At the penthouse, their home, they kicked off their hiking boots and settled onto the couch with Thai food and champagne. As the sun set over the city skyline, they talked about their future together, where they wanted to live long-term, whether they wanted children. They did, eventually. What kind of wedding they envisioned. "Small," Cassidy said firmly. "Intimate. Just family and close friends." "Agreed," Quincy nodded. "Though small might be relative, between my business connections and your salon clientele." "No business connections," Cassidy insisted. "Just people we actually care about." Quincy kissed her hand. "Whatever you want, this is your day." "Our day," she corrected. "And I don't need anything fancy. Just you, showing up and meaning it." They decided on a 6-month engagement, long enough to plan properly, but not so long that the anticipation would drive them crazy. The wedding would be held in Oregon, at a picturesque vineyard near Cassidy's hometown that offered views of Mount Hood on clear days. The following weeks were a whirlwind of planning and announcements. Cassidy's clients were thrilled for her, though some seemed more excited about the fact that she was marrying a billionaire than about her actual happiness. She tried not to let it bother her, focusing instead on the genuine well-wishers. Elizabeth insisted on being Cassidy's maid of honor, a role Cassidy was happy to offer her future sister-in-law. The two women had grown close over the past year, their relationship extending far beyond the salon chair. 3 months before the wedding, Quincy surprised Cassidy with yet another proposal. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they reviewed potential caterers. "What if you opened your own salon?" Cassidy looked up, surprised. "What brought this on?" "You've mentioned before that you'd like to run your own place someday. Set your own rules, create your own atmosphere." He shrugged. "Why not now?" The idea was tempting. Cassidy had indeed dreamed of having her own salon, but the startup costs had always seemed prohibitive. "I couldn't let you bankroll something like that," she said hesitantly. "What if it were a wedding present? Or better yet, what if we structured it as a business loan with clear terms? You'd have complete creative control, I'd just be the silent investor." Cassidy considered the proposal. Having her own salon would mean setting her own hours, building the kind of inclusive, welcoming space she'd always envisioned, maybe even mentoring young stylists fresh out of beauty school. "I'd want to do it right," she said slowly. "Not rush it. And definitely not open until after the wedding and honeymoon." "Of course," Quincy agreed. "This would be a long-term project. Take all the time you need to develop the concept, find the right location. I just want you to know the option is there if you want it." The conversation planted a seed that grew over the following weeks. Cassidy began researching locations, equipment costs, and business plans, finding herself increasingly excited about the possibility. By the time they flew to Oregon for final wedding preparations, she had a solid concept for a salon that would combine high-end services with community outreach, regular days offering free haircuts for job interviews, workshops for parents learning to style their children's hair, and partnerships with local shelters. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with just enough crispness in the air to make the outdoor ceremony comfortable. Barbara Kane cried through most of the morning as she helped Cassidy prepare, alternating between tears of joy and reminiscences about Cassidy's childhood. "Your father would have been so proud," she said as she fastened the delicate necklace with the Eiffel Tower pendant around Cassidy's neck. Something old for the ceremony." "I know," Cassidy replied, squeezing her mother's hand. The mention of her father, who had passed away 5 years earlier after a brief reconciliation with his daughter, brought a bittersweet pang. Elizabeth arrived to help with the final touches, bringing something borrowed, a pair of sapphire earrings that had belonged to Quincy and Elizabeth's grandmother. "These brought my grandparents 50 years of happiness," Elizabeth said as Cassidy put them on. "I figure they're good luck." The ceremony itself was everything Cassidy had hoped for: intimate, personal, and focused on the love she and Quincy shared rather than the spectacle of the event. Standing before their closest friends and family, with Mount Hood visible in the distance, they exchanged vows they had written themselves. "Cassidy," Quincy began, his voice strong despite the emotion in his eyes, "before I met you, my life was full of achievements but empty of real joy. You changed everything. You showed me that success isn't measured in dollars or deals, but in moments of connection and understanding. You challenge me, support me, and make me laugh even on my worst days. I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the love you've given me so freely. I promise to be your partner, your best friend, and your biggest fan. And I promise that no matter how busy life gets, you will always be my priority." When it was Cassidy's turn, she took a deep breath to steady her voice. "Quincy, I never expected you. I never expected this love that has transformed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. You truly see me and love me not despite my flaws but including them. You've shown me what it means to be a true partner, supporting my dreams as fiercely as your own. I promise to stand by you through whatever challenges life brings us. I promise to remind you of what truly matters when work threatens to consume you. And I promise to love you with all that I am, every day, for the rest of our lives. The reception was held in a beautifully restored barn on the vineyard property, transformed with twinkling lights, wildflowers, and long wooden tables that encouraged conversation among the guests. True to their wish for a personal celebration, the guest list had been kept to under 100 people, a far cry from the society wedding many had expected from someone of Quincy's stature. During dinner, Elizabeth rose to give her maid of honor speech, champagne flute in hand. When my brother first told me he was interested in my hairdresser, I thought he was joking, she began, earning laughs from the guests. Quincy had always been so focused on his company that I'd started to think he might marry his laptop. But then I saw how he looked at Cassidy like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out but was desperate to solve. She turned to face the couple. Cassidy, from the moment you started doing my hair, I knew you were special. Your kindness, your humor, your absolute refusal to let me get bangs when I was going through that crisis last year, all of it showed your character. When Quincy met you, I knew immediately that you were exactly what he needed. Someone real, someone grounded, someone who would love him for who he is, not what he has. Her expression grew more serious. Quincy, my brilliant, stubborn, generous brother, I've never seen you happier than you are with Cassidy. She brings out the best in you. She reminds you to live in the moment, not just work toward the next goal. You two balance each other perfectly, and I couldn't be happier to officially welcome Cassidy into our family, though in truth, she's felt like family from the beginning. The celebration continued late into the night, with dancing under the stars and heartfelt conversations with loved ones. When Cassidy and Quincy finally made their escape, slipping away to a luxury cabin on the vineyard property, they were exhausted but exhilarated. Mrs. Lawrence, Quincy said, lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. That's going to take some getting used to, Cassidy laughed as he set her down in the cozy living room where a fire was already burning in the fireplace. Though I was thinking of keeping Kane professionally. Cassidy Kane has been my brand at the salon for years. Whatever you want, Quincy said, helping her remove the pins from her hair. As long as you're my wife, you can call yourself whatever you like. Your wife, Cassidy repeated, savoring the words. I like the sound of that. The honeymoon 2 weeks split between the Maldives and Japan. An unusual combination that reflected both their desires was a perfect pause before beginning their married life in earnest. On their last night watching the sunset from their overwater bungalow in the Maldives, Cassidy turned to Quincy with determination in her eyes. I've decided, she said, about the salon idea, and I want to do it. But I want to do it right, find investors beyond just you, develop a solid business plan, maybe even take some business courses. I want it to be something I build, not just something I'm given. Quincy's pride in her was evident. I never had any doubt you would approach it that way. And I'll support you however you want, as an investor, as a silent partner, or just as your biggest cheerleader. Back home, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Their day-to-day routine didn't change dramatically. They had already been living together for months. But there was a new sense of permanence, of building something lasting together. Cassidy continued working at Bliss and Beauty, while developing her business plan for what would eventually become Haven Salon and community space. Quincy helped her connect with potential investors and mentors in the business world, but was careful to let her take the lead, respecting her desire to create something truly her own. 6 months after their wedding, as they celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, Cassidy had one more surprise to share. I have something for you, she said, handing Quincy a small wrapped package. He opened it curiously to find a pair of tiny baby booties. "Are you?" he began, his eyes wide. Cassidy nodded, her smile radiant. "Due in July. I just found out yesterday." Quincy's reaction pure. Unfiltered joy followed by immediate concern for her well-being confirmed what Cassidy already knew. That this man, this life they were building together, was everything she had ever wanted without knowing she wanted it. As Quincy placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach, whispering promises to their unborn child, Cassidy reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a chance meeting at a salon to building a family together, their story had unfolded in ways neither could have predicted. "What are you thinking about?" Quincy asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Just how lucky I am," Cassidy replied, covering his hand with hers. "To think that all this started because you came to pick up your sister one ordinary Tuesday." "The best decision I ever made," Quincy said, leaning in to kiss her softly. And as they sat together, planning their future and dreaming of the family they would soon become, Cassidy knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary places, like a busy salon on an otherwise unremarkable day.